Good morning. Welcome. We're glad that you've joined us today on this beautiful Memorial Day. Yes, we are recording on Memorial Day.
Monday session.
Yes. And we are remembering and thankful for all of those who gave their life to have the freedom that we enjoy. We are so thankful. And so we are kind of a little bit somber today thinking about them and those that gave their life for our freedom. I'm very thankful. And I love seeing all the posts and everything on Facebook of people appreciating that. And so that's good. We are recording today.
What are we doing?
Well, I got all kinds of problems today. We're recording today because on Wednesday, we are going to be in the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
We are heading to the Florida Keys for our daughter's 16th birthday trip. So for Sweet 16, all the girls get 2 nights away with mom and dad at a place of their choosing that we can drive to. And so she chose Florida Keys. Are you excited?
Yeah, it's about a 7-hour drive from here. 4-ish to Miami, and then it's another 3-hour drive down the Keys. I've never been there, so I'm really looking forward to the drive and just spending some time. I'm organizing some of the things we're going to do along the way, and we're heading out at 5 in the morning tomorrow. So we've got to get everything recorded today, and then I have to do all the work that I have to do to make sure that it gets out to all of our podcast channels.
Yes. And then that's where everybody can enjoy the content we provide.
So, but it has me thinking about what are your birthday traditions? Like, what do you do? Do you do anything special for certain birthdays versus other birthdays? We'd love to hear some of those things. And so comment in there and we'll have a little bit of conversation about that.
Yeah, there's like golden birthdays and miles. I don't know.
What's your deal today?
I have a tickle in my throat. Hang on.
You sound like a smoker. You sound like Miley Cyrus in that, like...
We used to be young.
Yeah.
It's honestly, I think I had coffee with cream. And that messes up your throat, right?
I have no idea. I don't drink it.
Hang on. Let me use my beautiful family meeting tumbler cup to take a drink of ice cold water.
But it is. You've got Sweet 16. You've got golden birthdays. You've got certain things depending upon your background and all of that, whether you do like a quinceañera or...
Yeah. And there's like the big when they come into double digits. That's a big deal too.
Yeah, teenagers. So there's a lot of different ways that you could... Actually, one of the things that we're trying to figure out now is, now that our oldest has turned 18, like, what do we do at 19 and beyond?
Right.
Do we just keep having the same parties that we've been having, or do we do something different? So we haven't quite figured that out yet. I'd actually be curious about how you've handled that, the switch from 18 to 19.
I would love to hear your thoughts. And I would also, I think we should maybe put that on the family meeting community and hear what everybody's doing after their kids turn 18 and beyond. But today we are talking about healing from deep hurts in your relationship. So we'll, it's a little bit heavier of a topic than some that we've talked about in the past. So, but we believe it needs to be talked about. So we're going to get into that today.
All right, here we go. Gather around, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas, and this is my wife, Miley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 192 of the Family Meeting podcast.
All right, hold on. You can't mix it up because when I'm editing, you need to say the same thing.
What did I say?
You said hello and welcome to episode 192.
Oh. I didn't even know that I did that.
You did it last episode also.
Really?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of work to splice.
Oh, I don't want to make more work for you.
So.
Take 2. Hello and welcome to our family.
Perfect.
Welcome to episode 192 of the Family Meeting podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about healing from deep wounds in your marriage. There are some things that are just so hard to get over, and they're so hard to let go of. Some things aren't easy to just heal from and snap back into chipper, happy, normal relationships. And we're going to talk about how to help you begin your journey of healing. And healing is a journey, which that's something we're going to talk about in today's episode.
But maybe one of the things that you need to do is you need to kind of work on that relationship, maybe it's just about getting a little bit of a refresh. And we've got a wider range of listeners. We've got some people who listen who are literally, their marriage is that close to just calling it done. And then we have some very strong marriages. They've been married for decades, and they've kind of, figured out their way through some very troubled waters. But it's just about enjoying and renewing that love and that friendship that you have in your relationship. And so we want to invite you to Relationship Refresh 2024. It'll be in beautiful Flagler Beach. It's being hosted at Coastal Family Church, and we're so thankful for our friends over there. I would ask you to be in prayer for Pastor Rod Palmer of Coastal Family Church. He's having some heart issues, was supposed to be having a procedure done last week, but there was some complications that came up. He is home healing from that and hopefully going to be going into surgery very soon. So be in prayer for Rod and Val at this time. But Relationship Refresh is going to be hosted at their church. And we're excited about that, July 12th and 13th. And here's the thing. It's only $25 a couple.
Wow. So
it's really to help just cover the cost of putting the event on. That's really what it's about. Because we want to make it so that you can affordably concentrate on your relationship.
Really, anyone can afford this.
Yeah. And we have spoke at and we've been to marriage retreats that cost $250, $300, whatever dollars. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But that could hinder some of the people who need some help. And so it's local. We're putting it on, and here local to us, so that people can have an opportunity to be working on their marriage relationships.
But even though it's local, I will say, no matter where you live, fly into this beautiful part of Florida and come and join us, because it is beautiful here. The location of the event is a block and a half from the beach.
Yeah.
You can leave the event and go on a walk on the beach with your spouse. And when we finish Friday evening, you can literally go and watch the sunset at the beach.
Yeah, and you can have lunch at one of our local restaurants where you could sit up on the top deck overlooking the ocean. It is absolutely amazing.
Multiple times we've seen dolphins while eating lunch or dinner there.
So I'm going to shout out Drew and Chloe.
Targeting. This is targeting.
Yeah, and say this is your time. If any couple needs it, you guys need it, and it's Florida. So
he's kidding. But we just want to guilt them into coming to Florida. That's
so information on all of our social and website and all that stuff will be put out very quickly. We just literally finalized the location, and so wanted to get that out to you as soon as possible so you could reserve your date, July 12th and 13th of this year.
Mm-hmm. All right, so today we are talking about healing from emotional hurts and wounds. But I want to tell you about this situation that I found myself in very recently. So I'm a painter. I have a painting business, and I paint homes, interior, exterior. But that's not all I do. Sometimes I will do flooring and trim work and caulking and casing, door casings, and all kinds of stuff. I kind of love to do everything. But I was laying some flooring for some clients, and you use a very sharp knife to cut the vinyl plank flooring. And I had just done something stupid. I was rushing, as I always do, and I cut my wrist. A big, just sliced off a bunch of skin off my wrist. And of course it starts bleeding right away. So I'm now bleeding on this brand new flooring, and I'm trying to get the blood to clot, but still keep working because I'm always in a time crunch.
It's like a nightmare situation when you're in somebody else's house.
Yes, to be just bleeding all over the place. And I was like, oh, that millisecond of stupidity. I literally was just one brief moment of carelessness. And bam, I've got this wound, this problem. Well, I literally taped some tissue, piece of paper towel onto my wrist so that it wouldn't keep bleeding all over everything, so I could keep moving forward and using my saw and everything too. And it was weeks, like literally weeks later, when my wrist would get bumped and that wound would be reopened and it would begin to bleed again and hurt again. And then there would be times when like I forgot that I even had it until somebody would bump it again, or I would bump it again. And I would be like, oh yeah, that's right. This wound hasn't healed yet. And what I think is fascinating about that is that it took a second of time to create the wound.
Yep.
But weeks and weeks later, I was still dealing with the headache of this stupid little cut. And that makes me think of how it is with emotional healing.
Yeah, it takes just a fleeting moment to hurt deeply.
Right.
And from that brief moment, a wound is created that lasts a long time. And I think later on we're going to talk about a situation where in a moment I said some things that were very hurtful.
Right.
And that's exactly what happens sometimes. Is our emotions are heightened from whatever the conflict or whatever the situation is, and we can say things, we can do things in just a moment that is going to take a long time to heal. Healing is a process.
Right.
And there's no set amount of time for how healing takes place. Now, I know for physical things, they do have, like, they figured out for most people, like, it should take this amount of time.
Yeah, I was amazed because I remember with my C-section surgery with Abigail, our third daughter, they told me, you won't feel normal for 6 weeks. And I was like, no, I'll feel better. It won't take me that long. And it was literally like 6 weeks, almost to the day, when I told Thomas, all day long, I felt pretty good. Like, I forgot about it all day long. I think I'm better. And then we looked at the calendar, and sure enough, it was 6 weeks. Like, they had mapped it pretty closely.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that because Caitlin at our church just had to have an emergency C-section and with their son, Junior. And it literally just brought back all the emotions, all the feelings from when we went through that with Abigail. And here, that was 16 years ago now. We're leaving tomorrow for her 16th birthday trip. But, they've got it mapped out. But even in that, it's like, it's about 6 weeks, right? And then there's certain things that aren't going to heal for an even longer amount of time.
Yes.
And so even in that, like, yeah, you'll feel pretty good after 6 weeks, but there's still a lot of healing and things that are taking place. Emotional wounds aren't that way.
Right.
There is no predictor of if your husband says this to you, it'll take this many weeks to get over it. If your wife does this to you, it'll take this many months to get over it. There's nothing like that. And so it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but be grateful for the process. Because the process of healing brings us into a deep relationship with God.
Right.
And often on the other side of healing is a better life than before.
Yeah. And you may be so deeply hurt today. Maybe your spouse has cheated on you. They have broken that ultimate trust, and the trust is gone, and you are trying to forgive, and you are trying to get past it, and you are trying to not be angry anymore, but it's still there. It's that wound that just isn't healing. It's certainly not healing as fast as you want it to, right? We all want our wounds to heal quickly so we can get past these things. Maybe you are angry at your spouse. The one you trusted more than anyone has hurt you in some way. It can be words they say. It can be broken trust. It can be things that they do or things they don't do or won't do. No one has the power to hurt you like those closest to you.
Right.
And the reverse is true. You have more power to hurt your spouse than anyone else in the world. And it feels like sometimes in a relationship when you get hurt by your spouse, you're like, man, I can't believe that the person I trusted more than anyone else in the world would do that to me. I really believed that they would never hurt me. But it's been happening for years and years and years. Even in the Bible, we see people who were closest to other people and they hurt them, family members, spouses, and so on.
Well, and you just think about it logically, right? Because even physically in our home, like no one has the power to physically harm me like Lysandra does.
Yes, because you sleep like a baby right next to me every night. I could do anything.
Right. I come home, my guard is down. Like if I'm around a stranger, especially somebody who maybe is acting a little rational and everything else, our guards are on high alert, right?
Yes.
We're watching and working to protect ourselves. We get home, we're around our family members, the people that know us the most. We feel safe. I let my guard down. I don't think about ever being physically harmed in my own house when it's just the six of us.
Right.
So you could take me out very easily.
Right.
But all right, now let's think about that with the information that's been trusted to us. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we keep ourselves guarded with people outside of our family members or outside of our close friends. But with those who are inside it, we give them all the information about us. Like Lysandra knows everything about me. She knows every insecurity, everything that's happened in my life. She knows, so she can use those things as weapons if she chooses to. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we choose to. We choose to use that against the person that we love. And think about what King David talks about in Psalm 55. And this is a portion of scripture that I really just spent some time in a few years ago. And it was interesting to just see his heart and how that applies relationally to people who are closest to us. He says this in verse 12. For it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. It is not an adversary who deals insolently with me, then I could hide from him. Okay, so he's like, hey, if it's an outsider, if it's a stranger, hey, I can deal with that. I don't really care what they say about me. I don't really care what they think about me.
Yeah, we expect our enemies to mistreat us. We expect strangers to be careless and inconsiderate. But that's not the case in this situation.
And even physically, like if it's an enemy, I'm going to guard myself. Mm-hmm. But here's what he says in verse 13. But it is you. Like, and you can just you can hear the emotion in those words. It's you, he says, a man my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. In other words, somebody who's so close to me. And then he talks about the fact that, hey, we used to take sweet counsel together within God's house. We walked in the throng, and he's saying, hey, you were my close friend. Like, we spent time together. You were my brother. Like, we did everything together. We talk things out, and we've got those people that we just, they're our therapy, right? We talk it out with, and hopefully you are able to do that with your spouse. Husbands, hopefully you should feel safe and comfortable talking to your wife about what's going on in your life, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you've been through. And that's exactly what he's saying is like, hey, we took sweet counsel together. Like we just chatted over things. We were like spiritually in the same place as well, in God's house, and we're walking together. And so that is a wound that cuts so deep. Mm-hmm. So deep. And that's exactly what the psalmist is feeling here.
So that may be what you're dealing with. You may be sitting here saying, I can relate to David. I can relate to King David and how he felt, because the person closest to me has hurt me very deeply. And if it was a stranger, I could have borne it, but it was the person I trusted more than anything, and I cannot bear it. So we want to help you figure out how to get on the road to emotional healing.
Yeah.
Because like we said, Thomas already mentioned it, it is a process. It's not a snap your fingers and it's done. Here's the formula. You do the formula and boom, you're better. That's not how it works.
I wish
it were. But it is a process. So number one, the first thing that you need to do in this process of healing to get you on the journey toward healing is identify the wound. You have to identify the wound. This is the first step to healing, is recognizing that there is a wound, that there is a problem. Think about a physical issue. When you go in and you are going to the emergency room, the first thing they do is send you to triage. They have got to figure out what happened. Where's the wound? They have to identify the problem. And go ahead.
I was just going to ask, like, when was the last time you've been to an emergency room?
Personally?
Yeah.
Would have been having babies. Oh, wait, no. What year was that? 2019?
2019?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, when I carried you in.
Yeah.
So then they got to assess what happened. The only time I remember going to the emergency room for myself is when I was a young child.
Oh, yeah?
I remember it. It was at St. Luke's, and I remember it because there was, what was that pink bear's name?
Lovey Bear.
Lovey Bear,
Lovey
yes.
Bear. They gave out pencils and stickers. Oh, my gosh, I loved Lovey Bear.
Yeah, Lovey Bear.
He always gave me hugs.
So, head injury. I fell and gashed my head open.
Wow. I've never heard that story.
So it just came to me right now. You're talking about going to the emergency room, them checking out, and I got this like little flash in my mind of Lovey Bear.
Yeah.
But that's what they do, right? They check it out and
They have to assess.
figure out what's going on.
They have to identify the wound, and that's what we have to do. And oftentimes, we don't want to admit we're hurt or that the injury is still bothering us. Like, we don't want to go there. We want to take this emotional wound and we want to put it into a box, and we want to put the lid on the box, and we want to chain up the box, and then we put it in a deep, dark place in our mind so that we never think about it. And I want to tell you that's not going to get you on the road to healing. That is not going to help you. You have to take the time to go there. You have to go to the wound, and you have to look at it. You have to face the wound. Unfortunately, you have to relive it. You have to feel the feelings. You have to get the box and undo the chains and open the lid and look inside the box. And you have to look at those emotions. This really, the best way that I can help people to understand how important this is healing from sexual abuse. And we've shared before on the podcast that I have experienced sexual abuse as a young teenager. And the best thing that I ever did was to talk about it and tell the story to somebody that I trusted and to relive it. Because when I relived it, it was horrible and it was awful and I cried and it was terrible and I felt all of the pain again that I had been pushing away for many, many years. But when I relived it, it was that beginning of being able to heal from it. And I feel like sometimes we want to say, oh, I'm fine. You're fine. We're all fine. Everybody's fine. We're not going to talk about it. That is not going to get you on the road to healing.
Right. Pretending it never happened is not going to help you heal. It's just going to create this thing in you that's going to keep festering, the bitterness and all of that.
Right.
It's like if you have some sort of, maybe you've had like a splinter or something else that's gotten underneath your skin and you just kind of pretend like it's not going to go away.
Yeah. Pretending it doesn't exist doesn't make it not exist.
Like you've got to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe you've had this experience. I've had this experience where you have like an abscess in your tooth or something, and it's like getting puffy and all of that. It's filling up with all that gross stuff, right?
Oh.
And if you just pretend like nothing's happening, like even though you've got this like thing on your face. Your whole cheeks about to explode, but yeah, like you've got to open it up and you've got to deal with it.
Right. That's the only way to healing. And I love this little phrase that somebody said. If you keep sweeping it under the rug, it's just going to make a bump in the rug and you're going to trip on it. So that doesn't help to just sweep it under the rug. And I love this portion in Psalms 55. We're talking about King David here. Remember, he's been hurt by someone closest to him. And in verse 20, he says, my companion stretched out his hand against his friends. He violated his covenant. And remember, a covenant is a promise. It is a contract between two people. You are in a marriage covenant with your spouse. That is what a marriage is a covenant relationship. And David says, my companion stretched out his hands against his friend. He violated his covenant. Verse 21 says, his speech was smoother than butter. Yet war was in his heart, and his words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. And so he is identifying the wound here. He is saying exactly what happened. He's not pretending it didn't happen. He's not trying to compartmentalize it and push it away. He is identifying the wound and saying, this is what happened. And it hurt.
Well, and here's the thing, too. When we're talking about verbalizing it, you know, the triage and all of that, we're not talking about just picking at the wound over and over again. Because some people do this where it's almost like they want to stay in that victim mentality type thing where it's like they keep talking about it and they keep talking about it and they keep talking about it. But it's not for the purpose of healing. It's for the purpose of continuing to hold on to whatever the hurt is. And those are two very different things. It's very different for you to go to a doctor and have a doctor help you with a wound than if you just sit there and keep picking at it.
Right.
And so that's the important distinction to make is I'm verbalizing it for the purpose of gaining healing from it. And this brings us to the second part of the process, second point of the process. And that is go to God daily for healing.
Right.
So ultimately, like, it is good to be able to verbalize that. So I verbalized things that have happened in my life with Lysandra, and things that have happened in my past that, they're hard to talk about. But I share it with her for the purpose of getting it out there. Like, and there is healing in that. There's healing in just getting it off of your chest and bringing it out in the open so it doesn't have that power and that control over you anymore. But here's the thing. Lysandra cannot bring me healing. She just can't. I cannot bring her healing. There is relief in telling the person you love about what's going on in your life. And if they've hurt you, you need to be able to vocalize that to them in a way that doesn't cause more damage to the relationship. But ultimately, God is the only one who can heal us. A broken heart heals when we allow the healing to go as deep as the wound. And that Beth Moore said that, and I just love that. And I'll say that again for some of you who maybe just you didn't get it. She said this: a broken heart heals when we allow the healing to go as deep as the wound. And so now that you have allowed yourself to face the feelings and open the wound up in order to treat it, you can properly give it to God. Sometimes we don't even realize everything that's happened inside of us until we get a chance to sit down with somebody and verbalize it.
So once you identify that wound, then you can give it to God. But if you're just pretending it doesn't exist, or you're keeping it in the box, or you're not going as deep as the hurt went, then you really can't give that to God because you haven't even recognized it. So once you do recognize it and go as deep as the wound went, then you can take that deep hurt and you can bring it to God. And here's what King David said in Psalm 55, 17 through 19. Verse 17 says, "Evening and morning and at noon, I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice."
You can hear the anguish and the sorrow and everything in that.
And my guess is you've been there. You get what he is saying. It hurts so bad. It is anguish. You just moan.
Yeah, that, and we've all heard it, or we've all done it ourselves, where I think about the most recent time I heard it was with one of my daughters. She got her heart broken. And just hearing like the sorrow come out of her is that kind of idea that he's talking about here, where you don't even have words. It's just like this sound that comes out.
But what I love is that it's geared toward God. It's directed at God because he says he hears my voice. And verse 18 says, "He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me." 19, "God will give ear." And then jump to verse 22. Listen to this. "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved." So here, David knows exactly where to go with his wound. He gives us this example of what we need to do. Just go to God and moan and just pour out your anguish to him. You've looked at the wound. You've allowed yourself to feel the hurt of the wound. You take that hurt and now you give it to God. You just cry out to God. Cast your burden to him. And listen to the beginning there. He says evening and morning and at noon.
Yeah.
It's literally, sometimes it's all day. Sometimes it is all day where we are just pouring out our hearts to God.
Well, and part of that is, you have different things throughout the day that'll just remind you.
Yeah.
And one of the things you talked about, we were having this conversation about this topic, and you were talking about the thing on your wrist where you were typing and, you'd bump it. which I don't think you're typing right if you're bumping your wrist, but
I would set my wrist down on the laptop keyboard, okay? Like on the side.
But it reminded you, like different things throughout the day reminded you of that.
Yeah.
And that's true of our emotional pain as well. It's like, there's something that happens at night where it just kind of brings back, like maybe that was the time where you'd have these personal conversations with your spouse. And so you're going through your nighttime routine and it just reminds you of that wound that happened. And he talks about it morning. You've got certain things that happen in the morning, at noon. So all throughout the day, we have these things that are reminding us of the pain that we're in. And in that moment, that's when we need to cry out to God.
Yeah. And cast your burden on the Lord. Like it literally says, cast your burden on the Lord.
And the idea is to give daily dependence on God for everything you need, including healing. And I think about what Jesus told his followers. He was teaching them to pray in Matthew chapter number 6. And he says this, give us this day our daily bread. And we kind of look at that and we just automatically think about food, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are people who literally don't know where their next meal is going to come from. Mm-hmm. And they're praying this prayer very literally. God, give us this day our daily bread. We have been there in our lives, not in a very long time, but when we were first married and first starting out and we made no money, there were times where we literally had no food and had no idea where our next meal was going to come from, and we prayed this very literally.
Yes.
But for most of us, this isn't the case, right? But the idea behind it is we're going to God and asking him for what we need for today. God, give me what I need for today. And what some of us need today is we need healing from God. Mm-hmm. We need his help with this wound that we have that has taken place inside of us. And so we ask for the healing every single day. God, give me the healing that I need today. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we want to remind you of, and we talked about this at the beginning of the episode, is healing is a process that happens daily. It doesn't happen immediately. Okay, so that means when I get up, I'm going to pray and ask God to help me be for healing today. Mm-hmm. When whatever brings back up that at noon, God help me, I need your healing right now. Mm-hmm. Going through my nighttime routine and hey, it brings it all back up again. I'm going to God again. I'm pouring out my heart. I'm running him for safety. But give me what I need in this moment right now to find healing.
That's right. And the third step in this process of getting on this this journey to healing is to regularly update your spouse on how the wound is progressing. This is really important because you have got to keep your spouse in the loop. Maybe what happened is someone said something they shouldn't have said, and, it was a big blowout, but then they did ask for forgiveness, and you accepted their apology and you said, yes, I'm going to give you forgiveness. I forgive you. But the wound is still there. You've got to let them know how that wound is progressing.
Well, and you talk about just words, and I'd mentioned earlier in the episode. So at one point, and it's been a little while now, but at one point we were having a heated argument about, I don't even remember what anymore, but you may remember. Do you remember what we were fighting about?
Yeah.
What were we fighting about?
I was pregnant. And also nursing, I think.
I knew she would remember.
Yeah, because I do. I just remember stuff like that. But yeah, you wanted to go out with friends, and I wanted you to stay home and help me with the kids and stuff.
But
this was in our Iowa house.
I remember, and it was in that moment where just you say something you shouldn't. And I said the words, you make it so I don't even want to come home anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and what a hurtful thing that is to say to somebody. You say those words in that moment, and they're words that they'll probably never forget. And this is proof of that.
Yeah, because that was probably 15 years ago.
And you don't just heal automatically from that. And so being able to let your spouse know, like, hey, this is where I'm progressing in this right now in this.
Yeah, and you want to offer that forgiveness, and you want to say, like, it doesn't hurt my feelings anymore. But there are times when it still does, and you're trying to get over it, but you need to let them in on that. Let them know how it's going. I love you and I have forgiven you, but I'm not totally healed from the hurt. It still hurts right now. And I think about some different people that we have come in contact with who have had affairs, and they're trying to recover from affairs, and they're trying to get over it, and they're trying so hard to trust again.
Which you can come back from it.
Yes, you can.
You can heal from it.
We have multiple examples of people who have one spouse has cheated on the other, and they're still in the marriage today, years and years later. Like they're doing great. So it can happen, but it's not easy, and you don't just heal from that pain right away. And one thing that they were sharing with us is that the anger comes and goes. Like you can be totally fine one day and you think like, yeah, that was so long ago, I don't even think about it anymore. And then something will trigger the wound. Something will kind of peel back or bump the wound, right? And then all of a sudden they're so angry with their spouse again, or they're so hurt and the hurt has just come back. And that anything can trigger it. Anything can bring that back up.
Yeah.
And so you got to let your spouse know, like, listen, I'm angry again. I'm just because I'm still dealing with this. I'm still processing the hurt. I'm still trying to get over it. This happened today, and this has brought up the anger again. I'm not really angry with you right now. I'm angry about what happened. And I just need you to know I just need a little time alone today, or I need some time with God today, or I need to walk through this again with you. I need to talk about this again, whatever it may be. But keeping them updated on how that wound is processing. Because remember, healing is a process and everybody's journey is different. It's not the same path. So when one person seems so much further along in healing and the other doesn't, that's okay because everybody's journey is different in healing.
Well, and here I want to bring it back to the physical again, because some people have a really hard time with this. Like they have a really hard time understanding, like, I said I'm sorry, you said you forgave me, why aren't you over this? All right, so let's bring it back to the physical in a way that every person can understand. So I talked before about physically, I feel safe here, my guard is down. So let's just say Lysandra and I, we're laying down at night, and pretty much every night I will lay my head on Lysandra's stomach and we'll watch TV together. And I often fall asleep that way.
Yeah, I rub his head until he falls asleep.
All right, so
he's like a cat, like a kitten.
Tonight, we go through our routine. I lay down on her stomach. We're watching TV, and Lysandra pulls out a knife from under her pillow.
This is quite the illustration.
And stabs me in the back. Right? Now, obviously, that's going to hurt. And you pull the knife out and you say, you're sorry.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I forgive you. I forgive you for stabbing me in the back, literally. Is the wound healed immediately?
No.
Obviously not. It's going to take a long time for that wound to heal. And the same is true emotionally. Like, you have stabbed that person in the back emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you say you're sorry doesn't bring healing. Just because they literally forgive you doesn't mean it brings automatic healing. It does take time, and it's painful, and it is a process.
Yeah.
So here's what I want to encourage you to do. Never shame or look down on your spouse that they aren't healing as fast as you are, or as fast as you would like. Or don't belittle them because they can't get over something as quickly as you can. Like, you don't get to dictate how quickly someone heals from emotional pain. You don't get to do that. Your physical bodies would not heal from the same injury in the same amount of time.
Right.
So why would you think that emotional healing should take the exact amount of time for two different people? It just doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm. That's right. All right, number 4. Celebrate the small victories. So yes, it hurts. You're in the middle of this wound. You have this thing you cannot seem to get over. But there are some small victories that come. And if you can get your mind on some small victories, then it's going to help you in your healing journey. Let's look at King David again. King David had all kind of problems.
Oh, yeah.
My goodness. And he's the man after God's own heart. And he is this cherished patriarch in Israel. And we look up to him in so many ways. But he had some problems, especially personally. In fact, at one point, his own son Absalom had risen up against him to take his kingdom and kill him and all of his offspring, basically. And he was chased out of his own home by his very own son. Like, how deep does that wound cut? Literally and physically. Literally and metaphorically.
Yes.
So in Psalm 34, we hear how King David felt in that moment, and one of the aspects of how he dealt with this deep, deep pain. He said in verse 8 and verse 18, "O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. When the righteous cry for help," there's that example again, going to the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. And verse 18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Have you ever felt crushed in spirit? Have you ever felt like your heart has been broken? Mm-hmm. That is a very specific level of emotional pain, and that is how he felt. But he says right before he talks about brokenhearted and crushed in spirit, he says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good." He talks about the good things of God. And if you really want to take some time, like if you are in this emotional hurt, I really strongly encourage you to read all of Psalm 55 and all of Psalm 34 and see the example of how David dealt with this deep emotional hurt from close relationships. But understand that he took his mind and he focused on some good things. He praised God. And more in verse 30, in chapter 34, he talks about encouraging other people to praise the Lord. And he goes through and he lists all these things that God has done and how good God is. And it is hard when you are devastated and you are brokenhearted and you are crushed in spirit to see good. It's really hard to find good things, but they are there if you look for them. And so try to see what has God done, in what ways. Maybe you could celebrate the fact that you trusted your spouse in a small way. Maybe you could celebrate the fact that your spouse has said positive things to you, even though you're still healing from that horrible thing they said to you. Maybe you can celebrate the fact that you were able to have a close physical relationship with your spouse. That's a reason to celebrate. You kind of jumped that hurdle. Find things to celebrate and celebrate them and give God the glory.
Well, and one of the things I love about those verses is David is able to clearly identify where the hurt and the wound came from. Okay, he didn't blame God.
Yeah.
And he was able to say, you know what, even in the midst of all the trouble and all the people hurting me, I do have a place I can go. And maybe that's true for you. Maybe you literally feel like, I can't trust my spouse. I don't really got nobody in my life that I can talk to, that I can share with. Hey, you still have God that's there. You can still go to him. And I love that. He is near to the brokenhearted, saves the crushed in spirit. And maybe what you need to do right now is literally just pause this episode and just pour your heart out to God, your hurt, your sorrow, your brokenness. And he has promised he will be there with you. And you can concentrate on just that for this moment. Because here's the thing. The healing process is directly affected by where you allow your thoughts to dwell. Thoughts affect our emotions, and emotions affect our healing. So whatever thoughts you allow your mind to indulge in will either help or they're going to hinder your healing. And Philippians chapter number 4 really deals with the specifics of our thoughts and what we ought to think about. And Lysandra, you want to share those with us?
Yeah. I think it's cool because it's like what you said earlier. You said, not to stay in that victim mindset where you just constantly replay it and you constantly talk about it and you just dwell on it. This is the opposite. In Philippians, we hear this is the opposite. Rather than doing that, rather than just wallowing and indulging in this victim mentality and all of the hurt and the pain and just staying there. Rather than that, verse 4 says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. When was the last time you rejoiced in the Lord? Like in your hurt, rejoiced in him. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything. Wow, that's hard when you're hurt.
Yeah.
To not be anxious about it. Rather than be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with what? Thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known to God, and the God of peace, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I feel like when you have a deep wound, peace is gone. There is no peace. It just hurts and it feels like chaos in your heart. But when you do the things that God says to do, he will give you peace. And it's peace that doesn't even make any sense. It surpasses all understanding. It doesn't make sense. And then here's the key for your mind. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there be any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. So where is your mind dwelling? Is your mind thinking about what's true? Or is your mind like those memes? We've seen them a million times, and I know you have too. The woman and the man are laying in bed back to back. The woman has a little bubble above her head, and it says, I bet he's thinking about another woman. And the husband has a bubble above his head, and it's like, I wonder if my car needs a new carburetor. You know, it's something random like that. And so sometimes we have in our mind like, oh, he's cheating on me again. Or, oh, he thinks this mean thing about me again. And it's not even true. We're just allowing that wound and our mind to take us to things that aren't true. Whatever is honorable. Are you thinking horrible, nasty thoughts towards your spouse because of the way that they hurt you? That's not honorable. It's not pure. It's not lovely at all. So take this checklist in Philippians 4 and make sure that your thoughts are in the right place, because it will hinder your healing if you cannot put your mind in the right place.
All right, so we move on to kind of the fifth step in this healing process. And what I want you to do, those of you listening to the podcast, I want your participation. So I'm going to start a phrase, and I want you to finish it. And I want you to literally say it out loud wherever you are, okay?
You're going to
So even if you're in a crowd listening with earbuds, just finish it out loud, okay? Here's the phrase. Forgive and... What's the word you said?
They said forget.
They said forget.
Definitely.
But here's the thing. That's not what I want you to do.
Right.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to forgive, remember, and release. So you are going to remember, right? It's not just, people say forgive and forget. Well, if we forgive and forget, you know, we might put ourselves back in a situation that we shouldn't put ourselves in.
Right. Like abuse.
So we're not going to forget. Earlier on, when we were talking about the fight that Lysandra and I had, like, she remembers.
Yeah.
Now,
I remember I was sitting on the top of the stairs. He was like halfway down the stairs looking up at me. I remember very vividly this situation, what we were wearing. I remember what he said, but I'm not angry.
Right. She is healed. She is over it. She does not use it against me. Like, she totally remembers it. And so remembering's not wrong. It's not bad. We do want you to remember. Now, it starts with forgiving. You got to forgive. You remember, and then you're going to release.
And this is when you're truly healed. When you can remember the pain, you can remember the trauma, you can look at the wound and not feel anger or resentment. That wound has now become a scar.
Yeah.
And it's still there. I have a C-section scar. I really, really hate it, ladies. I know that some of you are like, I know, me too. I hate that scar so much. But yet I can look at that scar and I can see it and it doesn't hurt me anymore. It's healed. It's fine.
Now, if your husband's laying on it, it might be irritated.
Yeah, there are times I was like, all right, you got to move. But yeah, when you can truly look at what has happened and the wound, and you can remember the pain, but not feel anger or resentment, that's when you know you're truly healed. That's when you know you're okay. When you can look directly at the wound, it's turned to a scar. You remember exactly how you got it, but yet you're not triggered. You have truly forgiven, and God has truly healed you.
And here's the thing. Healing doesn't mean the pain never existed. it means it no longer controls your life.
Right.
It doesn't control you anymore. And that's the place that we want you to get to. It might take a while. In some situations, it's going to take a very long time. But you just keep working through this process, and you can finally get to that place where you forgive, you remember, but you've released it. You've let it go, and it doesn't hurt you anymore. Mm-hmm. In family meeting tonight, we just want you to sit down with your spouse and talk about a wound that is still open. Maybe you've got a situation, they said something, they've done something. You've got a wound that is still open. And spend some time talking about it. And then praying about it. Talk to God out loud. Pray for healing for that wound. Talk about the feelings that arise when you face the wound. What are the feelings that come up when you just talk about it? Talk about the ways you see God working during the healing process. Like, what is he doing? What is he teaching you? What is he showing you? Where's the comfort coming from that he's provided for you? And so just talk to God out loud, praising for his working in your relationship.
Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to shoot us a text or call us, you can send a voice message at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite you to join us for our next family meeting as we have a special Ask Us Anything episode.
Oh, this could be fun.
I know. This is where we invite you to choose the content for the episode. Your questions will create the roadmap for next week's episode. We can't wait to hear what you want to ask.
So as we mentioned, you can email those questions at info@familymeeting.org. You can leave a voice message, and we'll literally play your question on the air and answer it.
You could have your very own voice on the Family Meeting podcast. How cool would that be?
So you can do that. Leave a voice message, or you can text your question. And it's the same number, whether you want to leave a voice message or text. And that is 904-257-3062. And we look forward to your questions. And really, the next episode will be as good as your questions are.
Ooh,
so it depends
pressure.
upon you.
Yeah.
Totally depends on you. So if next week's episode sucks, it's your fault. Okay?
Whose fault was this episode?
Yours. Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Ask us anything.
What do you got?
Maybe you put it in the comments right there, and you too can be a part of next week's episode.
That's right. Maybe you have some personal, deep, secret question you want to ask and try to get like some sort of secret out of us. I don't know what that would be because we share everything, but we'll see what people can come up with, the truth about the Osterkamps.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, we look forward to your questions, and we look forward to what we're going to be able to talk about next week. Until then, have a fabulous week, and we will see you next time.
Peace out.